So in today's update I really want to just talk specifically about two really relatively breaking changes that have recently just happened. The first really big thing has to do with the unemployment numbers. So the new unemployment claims report for the most recent week has now officially just come out, and there's been massive breaking changes revolving around that. The second thing really is I really just want to talk a lot more about the Omicron situation, because the really big breaking news that's happening right now is that the US has now officially confirmed not just its first case, but actually its first set of cases, where there are now officially 5 states that have a case of some kind. And again, all of this is very important, because the reason is that at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff that happens about Omicron and basically just the pandemic in general, or essentially why this whole thing even just started to begin with, was literally just because of the pandemic cases, which ultimately does have a massive impact to what the labor market, to what unemployment, to what the jobs report, to what everything in that world really revolves around. But we're going to talk all about that in today's update. So we're going to get immediately right to it, but maybe as always, same story real fast. Before we begin, consider smashing the like button if you guys enjoy videos like this, hopefully. Consider subscribing if you guys are interested. Of course, you guys can always decide, but it's always greatly appreciated. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, or maybe predictions or opinions about what you think about the current situation, especially maybe by the end. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So for today's update, is the first thing that I really just want to talk about is about the brand new unemployment numbers that just came out right here. Now, this is actually relatively really important, because we officially see a brand new change that's happening. And essentially what it is the fact that the unemployment numbers are now rising again. That is the really wild thing. Maybe for specific numbers out there, is that the week before last week, we saw a week where they essentially saw that about 194,000 people filed for unemployment. And every single week before that, for essentially the last couple of months, we've constantly seen a massive drop, which makes sense, because as people go back to work, or as people struggle to get onto unemployment, there will be naturally less and less claims. Well, what really ended up happening, they found this week, is that we ended up having a situation for just basically several weeks where we saw the unemployment numbers and claims start to drop, which in a good news, it does mean that, it signaled that things were getting a lot better. But this is essentially now officially the first week in a while that we now just saw cases rise up from the 190 something thousand people that, that happened the previous, so the week before last week, to now officially reporting that about 222,000 people just filed for unemployment. So this is essentially the first time that we are now starting to see a rise again. Now, what could that reason be? There's a lot of speculation. Part of it could maybe be because of the Omicron situation. Others could maybe just be something related to just seasonal, because we are approaching holiday season. And other people just maybe speculate that maybe it just has to do with the fact that maybe a lot of the people that were originally unemployed, or just were unemployed just in general, but maybe struggled to get unemployment benefits that were not necessarily counted for the numbers, a lot of this stuff maybe is starting to ease out a little bit. But of course, that really is just all the big speculation. But of course, because one of the largest things that people are talking about that may potentially impact things like unemployment in the labor market happens to be all about Omicron, which is what we're going to talk about next. Because the big breaking news is that, as just mentioned, is that we have officially now received report that not just the first case, but the first series and set of cases of Omicron has officially arrived in, specifically at this time, 5 states. The official 5 states that now officially have at least one case, if not actually several cases of the Omicron variant, is going to be in California, Minnesota. I believe California was the first one. Then it was Minnesota, Colorado, Hawaii, and now even officially New York. On top of that, they've also found that on an international level, it's now currently now officially reported to be in over 24 countries. So keep in mind is that not only basically just a couple of days ago, we received basically just the first report about Omicron where we just even learned about its existence, and it was only in South Africa at that time. Now the cases are growing not just globally into many countries, but now even into our own country across many, many different states. Even more specifically, I believe in New York, for example, which is where I'm from, and a lot of people I know here are also from New York. Of course, we have a very, global population, which is really, really awesome. But I do know is that, for example, even more specifically in New York City, they found that there were several cases. They even reported that about 1 to 2 weeks ago, there was a convention in New York City that happened, and I actually went to that convention. Crazy small world. I actually did go to that convention. That basically they found a case that someone at that convention in New York City was reported to have tested positive for the new Omicron variant. And I actually was, interestingly enough, crazy to think at that convention, it was essentially an anime-based, Comic-Con like convention. Now I did get tested, so thankfully, long story short is I actually got tested yesterday, if you're watching this on release date, and thankfully it came out okay. I got tested because it was actually required for my work outside of this, so I do work outside of this. But I think the biggest takeaway above all, I think with all of this said, is really about the fact that we're starting to learn a lot more information about the new Omicron variant, and probably one of the biggest things that they're now starting to really believe is that this Omicron variant might actually be even more wider spread than originally thought. In the beginning, we had a lot of different mixed opinions. Feel free to check out past videos, which I'll put at the very end screen, that talks a little bit about who actually thinks the Omicron situation is very serious and who actually thinks maybe it's not as serious. It's just really, something that they're just hyping up in the media. But according to new doctors that have now officially come out, they now believe that it might actually be even more wider spread than we originally think. This is even more true because keep in mind is that it almost feels like every single, just not even week, but just literally every single day at this point, we are starting to learn about some, extra number of cases, and it's going up exponentially. So this is on a pretty large scale. But probably the biggest significance above all when it comes to just talking and going back to the unemployment is that I think at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway really is just about the fact that as we start to get new information about the Omicron, which we are already starting to get a lot of information, it will probably depend so much on the new information that we get and how basically, I guess you can say, serious the Omicron situation really is, that is going to potentially impact things like unemployment, like our labor market. And based off of what we are currently seeing right now, based off of the new information that was just released less than 24 hours ago, if you are watching this on release date, it seems to appear that it might actually be even more serious than we had originally believed. And if that really does become the case, then it seems, or it basically means that there may be an even greater support, or certainly an even greater need to maybe potentially have them consider doing more unemployment. Now, I do know again is that there's obviously a lot of controversy. You probably have heard this before, but it's just because it really is particularly important to put out there. But I think the biggest thing is that at the very end of the day, we are already starting to see a lot of states take action to do their own individual programs. We do see programs related to things just specifically about vaccines, about mandates, specific groups of people. But of course, this varies across state to state. But the idea is that we are at least starting to see things start to come up. And I think that maybe is one of the more hopeful news. Of course, it is just sometimes, of course, hard, just to really think about the fact that, a lot of times it really does feel that like we have to start to see some hurt before we can start to see some help and support. That really is maybe one of the harder things to take in, but it is really the situation right now. But really beyond this is that that's what I really just wanted to share in today's update. So if you guys found that relatively insightful, maybe consider smashing the like button. If you guys haven't done so, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for similar videos like this. And as always, maybe feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, opinions, or predictions about what you think is going to happen, and maybe also what you think should really be done about this current situation. So that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well. If you're watching this on release day, happy Friday and have a really great weekend. Thank you guys so much again.